me.
Yes.
Valeria. Yes, Valeria or Val.
Okay.
You me. Oh, it's so lovely to meet you.
Thank you. It's great to meet you. Thank you for having me, for
Oh
having
my
us.
gosh.
Yeah.
Oh. Chicago Foundation for Women, right?
Yes. Yes.
Oh, welcome, welcome. It's an honor
Thank
to have
you.
you here. Oh my
Thank
goodness.
you. Thank you for having us.
Absolutely.
I'm so sorry I can't stay the whole time. I wish I could stay with you guys.
Well, anytime you can spend with us, we're so deeply grateful. So
Hi, Monica. How are you?
Hi, Omi. How are you? I'm good. Thank you
good.
so much. Don't worry. Here's the thing. I always like to plan. I always try to take up as much time as we can to talk about things. But if it's shorter, that's fine. And it probably will be. Munir isn't going to be joining us because his family, COVID is going through his family.
Oh, no.
Yes, which is awful. So he won't be joining us, and you and Catherine will have to leave early. So I think it's going to be a little bit shorter anyways. So don't worry, which is great for everyone.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think then we have to give you as much information as possible, like early on. I am going to do my disclaimer that I no longer work for the city and therefore I do not speak for.
That is perfectly fine. Don't even worry about that. And I think, I mean, yeah, don't worry about that. That's great.
Okay. Awesome.
And what I'm going to do, because I know I told you this before, is that I was hoping to do sort of an introductory presentation on fines and fees before the panel, but the city had major technical difficulties on that day. So I was unable to do that. So we're going to be doing things a little backwards, where we're going to have this panel and then I'm going to reinforce some of the learning after. So don't worry. I think that, you know, if we don't take up all the time, then there's plenty of things for the task force to deal with.
That's awesome. Thank you. Thanks.
Yeah. No,
I'm probably going to just like at like 7:10, if that's okay. So
it's totally fine. And what I'll do is I'll make an announcement that we have two folks that are going to leave, so you don't have to feel guilty or anything like that. You don't have to slink away in shame.
Just like that.
Leave your camera on, but just slowly go off camera. Yeah. Hi, Michelle.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing good. Doing good. And how are you, Valeria?
So lovely to be here with all of you. Hi, Monica. Hi, Michelle. Nice to meet you. I'm doing better. It's been a couple of rough weeks, but I am doing better. Thanks for asking. How about yourself?
I'm doing good. I'm enjoying all of this beautiful rain that we're getting.
I heard. Oh, thank goodness. I hope that's been helping with the fires. My gosh.
Yes. Valeria, where are you?
Right now, I am in Mexico with a client, but we'll be back next Friday, I think.
Oh, nice.
Beautiful New Mexico, yes.
That's wonderful, because I was going to say how I was hoping that you've been able to experience this beautiful rain that we're getting.
I know. The rain in Santa Fe is also very, very special.
It is.
Yeah, it's something else. I wanted to let you know, Monica and everyone, Councilwoman Villarreal is going from her office to her home, so she'll probably maybe couple of minutes after.
That's fine.
Half hour. But yeah.
Great.
But
Michelle,
yeah, I'm so go ahead.
I was gonna just tell Michelle and Umi, I mean, they're from San Francisco and Chicago. Well, they're not from there, but that's where they're at, right? And so their experience with rain is very different from ours, where we're like praying for it. And, you know, it's like an event when it starts raining here.
It is. I mean, you're literally, or at least I do literally kiss the ground like, thank you. Yeah. Thank you.
We're like in the street. It's all anyone can talk about. It's like all joy all the time. The best thing that could ever happen to us. And also my plants, I water them. I give them so much love. And they just react differently to rainwater. I'm like, what's in this? There's something in rainwater that just really makes my plants happy. My like zucchini and like my chili, like it just looks so happy right now. So it's nice.
Monica, I know last time you asked like what the weather was like in San Francisco. It's 100 degrees today. So
What?
yeah.
It's never that hot.
Here.
I don't think I ever experienced it being that hot ever. And I lived there for like 3.5 years.
Yeah. And like, yeah, and like further inland, it's like, I don't even want to know how hot it is out there.
That seems bad. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
What does that do? See, this is when I started thinking, well, earthquakes and like the ocean, you know what I mean? Because there's so much seismic activity over there that I wonder like
Gosh, yeah. I don't know.
how the heat interacts with that.
It's not something I know the answer to, but it can't be good.
I'm sorry, Michelle, I'm all, what terrible thing is about to happen in the place where you are at? I'm so sorry but you know, it's interesting.
Yeah, yeah.
I got teased in law school because I went to law school in San Francisco and I am from the desert. I've never experienced an earthquake before. And there was a small earthquake. And it started when we were in class and I sort of was like, what is that? But then everyone was like, get under the desk. So I quickly went under the desk and then everyone teased me that I was like way too fast going under, right? And then I got teased for the rest of class because I was speaking and it's law school. So they're all intense about when you speak. But it was nice because they didn't make me continue to speak after. And to be fair, I hadn't done the reading. So it was really, it was really useful in that sense, but I got made fun of after.
Yeah. So the lesson is get under the desk when you don't want to speak.
Just fake it, yeah. Or you just
Anyone feel that? Yeah.
Did anyone else feel that? I did. Yeah, wow, 100 degrees, that's crazy. Really crazy. Okay, here we have more folks. And hi, Katie, how are you?
Great, how are you?
Good, thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Awesome. Let's see, we have Brad and I think we're just waiting on Bethany because Munir unfortunately will not be joining us. And then of course, the rest of the task force and whoever else is joining this group.
Hi, everybody. I'm trying to get my camera to work, so bear with me. And I was just telling Valeria, be on, because there might be technical issues and I'm the one having them. So hold on, please hold.
No problem. That is one of our task force leaders and city council members. That is our councilwoman Villarreal. Full disclosure, we've known each other before she was an elected also, so it's very nice that we get to work together sometimes.
We have task force members on?
Not quite yet, just me.
Okay, huh.
Is it okay if I step away for like 2 minutes?
Of course, we're not going to start until 5:30 anyways.
Okay, I just realized I was terribly tired. I need to make myself an espresso.
No, go for it.
All right, thank you.
On that note,
Go for it, Valeria.
I haven't stopped, so I'll be right back.
Yeah.
Monica, I am going to be off video for maybe 20 minutes to begin, if that's all right.
That's fine. That's fine, Brad. Thank you for being here. Welcome.
I have a face for Zoom anyway. I did talk to Councilwoman Hallam, and she will be joining shortly. But I
Fantastic.
learned for the first time how to calculate mountain time.
That awesome. So, but you learned. That's great.
I put in my calendar for 2 hours earlier. So 5:30 in my naivete, I put in 3:30. So I had
my-
my whole thing planned around 3:30 until Bethany called me earlier and said the 7:30 meeting, which I said, no, don't you understand mountain time? So I tried to mansplain her on mountain time.
Oh no. How'd that go?
It didn't go well, and then I was disabused of my notion. So
Well, mountain time is not a time that people necessarily engage with on a regular basis, right? It's a lot of Pacific or Eastern time, right? But there's other folks. We got other stuff going on, right, in the rest of the country. But thank you for joining us regardless, Brad.
sure, we're so used to it in the East because everything, television was pretty much created for the East Coast, and we
Right?
get to watch everything at 1 o'clock or 8 o'clock, and you forget how the rest of the world lives.
Right. Whenever there's like some sort of event or something, and I think about all the East Coast people that are up so late in order to be able to watch it. I don't know. It's a weird thing.
Oh,
But regardless, we're so happy you're here. Thank you.
good. I am too.
Awesome. But yeah, don't worry about being off camera.
Okay.
We hope that you do show your face because it's just always nice to see it. Even though you say you're not Zoom ready, I disagree.
Oh, no, I'll be, once I get into a place where I'm not driving.
Okay, fantastic. Yeah, please
Yeah.
don't get in an accident.
I'm driving to Lake Erie, actually, where my family is right now. So I anticipate to be there in about 20 minutes.
Awesome.
Straight shot.
Hi, Bruce.
Hello. I got my Southside shirt on.
Wow.
Like that? It's in reverse.
Is it?
Oh yeah, because it says Southside.
Southside? What is that for?
Do you see the coloring in the background?
I see a little bit.
Do you know what the Chicago flag looks like?
I do know what the Chicago flag looks like.
Does it kind of look like?
Oh. Now I can see it. I can see it because I can see the blue. I couldn't see it at first.
So what does Southside refer to then in Chicago?
Yeah, it's Southside Chicago. I mean, I wouldn't.
No, White Sox. Come on.
Oh, yeah, the White Sox. Sorry about that. Sorry. See, we have somebody that's also lives in Chicago here today, Bruce.
Really?
I lived there also, but I wasn't a big.
Is that Umi that lived there?
Yes.
Yeah,
Where
I'm also a Sox fan, so, but I know nothing about baseball, so that's all I know.
Well, I worked in Chicago for about 31 years and then moved out to Omaha.
Oh.
I worked for both the Chicago Northwestern and the Union Pacific after they took over the CW. So I was a railroader for 38 years.
Wow.
Yep. It's awesome.
Well, I'm very happy that you like our Sox, our White Sox.
I have a video.
Really quick before you talk, Bruce, I just want to clarify with Valeria. Are you the host by chance? No. Huh.
And Renee, I'm not gonna need to share my screen. We're just gonna be talking. So just in case that's why you were asking, I don't.
Yeah, that's why I was asking. If
I
we
don't
were
need
gonna
to-
have,
And our panelists don't either. We're just gonna talk. When I follow up and we have a sort of deeper discussion on some fines and fees reforms, then I will need it. And I would have needed it doing the presentation before, but I just didn't want to cut into anybody's time. So we're just gonna chat today.
Okay, so we don't have, no one needs a screen sharing option.
No.
Okay. That's a good thing, maybe, even though, yeah.
Yeah, I find with panels, if we have a panel of folks that are gonna chat, that having a screen isn't as helpful. If we're just doing one presentation, that's different. And I'll follow up with the
Right.
presentation I was gonna do 2 weeks ago.
Let me just find out who is the host, because if no one's a host, then we might run into problems here. All right.
Usually it doesn't have a little thing under participants that says who's the host because it says closed captions is the host.
It is. I just messaged you, Renee, that it was closed captions.
Yeah, which is not okay, but we'll figure it out. Let's see.
Who's that?
Where's our crew? There's Annie. Okay, we have Bruce. We have Emily, Monica. All right. I think Mary Louise was, let me just double check. I think she's out of town.
And it looks like all of our panelists are present. And thank you everybody for joining us tonight. And thank you for your patience as we get started. We don't quite have all of our task force members present. And I don't know if we're gonna have more city staff joining.
City staff?
Yes, like, I'm not sure if, are we gonna have anybody else participating in the task force?
In terms of
Gino
city
Zamora?
staff, probably not. I don't
Okay.
think so. But we are recording this, so hopefully people can see it later on.
Is Councilman Rivera, is he gonna be here too?
You know, I think he's in Chicago, actually.
He actually is, because
Okay.
I gave him Lou Malinetti's, Giordano's, Berghoff's, Lowry's.
All the favorites.
Gumi knows all that good stuff.
I'll
Great
make you
Park.
hungry, Bruce.
Grand Park, Millennium Park, all the good stuff I gave him. He's there for a conference for
He's there for NALEO.
yeah.
The National Association of Latino elected officials, which I wish I could be there, but
You could be having
Have a-
Chicago pizza too, but you know,
I know, I
you
missed
chose
out on
to
it.
be with us.
It's true. Okay, so I'm just double checking. We have, oh, Gino, that's who we're missing. I was trying to
Right.
figure out who. Gino. Sometimes. Okay, we'll just give people a minute.
Just on a side note, Larry, he's helped me out a lot because I got some inquiries about teaching firearms training to school resource officers that aren't commissioned law enforcement. So he has a lot of knowledge there, and it was very helpful in working with the school district I was asked to train for, teach for. I mean.
Okay, so we have Mary Louise is stuck in traffic in Austin, Texas. So she will not be joining us. Okay, so Gina will be late. Just checking about hosting. All right, didn't hear from anybody. All right, we'll just go with it and hope we
Great.
don't need a host. Excuse me. I'm actually like discombobulated a little bit. I was supposed to be at my other office and I had to run home because my credentials don't work anymore. City credentials don't work anywhere else, I found out. So I had to rush home. So I'm glad to be able to get us all together today. And I actually think, I'm just checking, I don't think we have any community members on, but most of our task force members, not many people join us. We do record it and people do go back to our meetings. And so I think it's good that we're recording. We kind of have an informal way to start our meetings. And that's usually just our roll call, which we don't really do, but maybe Valeria, we could just say who's here and then who's excused.
Yes, absolutely. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the City of Santa Fe Community Health and Safety Task Force. Really quick roll call. We've got Councilwoman Renee Villarreal, Monica Halt, Annie Rasquin, Emily Karambach, and Bruce Finger. And I believe Gino will be joining shortly. Excused tonight is Marcela, Chris, and Mary Louise. And we have our gracious panel speakers, which I will turn to Monica to make that introduction when appropriate. Welcome, everybody.
And I just want to say before we start, some of you I didn't actually get to meet fully at the boot camp in Phoenix in March, and I learned so much from many of you, and so excited to actually be able to see you in the Zoom and be able to hear and learn from you, and actually excited that my colleagues get to listen and learn from you all as well, because I know all of us couldn't attend in person for the boot camp, and I just think it's the work you're doing and what you've been doing is extremely important. And we look to you for guidance. And I'm just excited also to have an elected official here as well, because I know the struggles of that world. And so, and Bethany, you totally inspired me. So just really happy that you're here with us again. And of course, community members, nothing happens in policymaking unless you actually have community leading the effort. So thank you all to your community advocacy and activism. And I will turn it over to Monica Alt. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And thank you everybody for joining us tonight. As everyone here knows, but I'll reiterate, I am going to do a follow-up presentation on fines and fees reform. We were hoping to do that 2 weeks prior, but we had some technical difficulties with the city, so we weren't able to do that. That being said, I think we can still discuss some of the local reforms around the country, and we have an amazing group of folks that have been working on this for some time. I did, and just so for the panelists, I did circulate your bios. I'm not gonna go over them here because I always sort of find like that can be a little bit redundant. And I'm gonna let all of you introduce yourselves. I'm just gonna give a brief overview, sort of kind of provide a little bit of New Mexico context. Also, we won't be joined tonight by Munir. Unfortunately, he's experiencing COVID at the moment, his family, so he's not going to be here. And two of our panelists are going to need to leave a little bit early. That would be Umi Grigsby and Katie Hurley. But I think we're still going to have a pretty robust conversation about some of the things that have been going on and give Santa Fe some ideas, potentially. So first, I just want to start out for everybody, and I know that we've talked at length about this, but sort of the difference between fines and fees. The main thing we'll be discussing tonight will most likely be fee reform, not necessarily fines. But just so that we have sort of a universal vocabulary for the evening. Fines are part of the sentence. In theory, they're supposed to deter people from crime or from breaking the law. And it's meant as a punishment. There's a range of different fines here in New Mexico. And as far as municipal courts, we have a a very sort of different structure. And we impose fines for criminal cases and for traffic. That's unique here in New Mexico because unlike some of the places we're going to hear about today, New Mexico is one of 13 states where traffic is criminalized. All of the other states, well, there's another 12 states that criminalize it, but all of the other ones do not criminalize traffic. It's actually a civil infraction. This is really important because when you criminalize something, there's always the potential that you could go to jail. It may not be part of the punishment, but you can issue a bench warrant for failure to appear or failure to pay in a traffic case, which means you can go to jail for something as small as a cracked windshield. And that's also true in the city of Santa Fe. That doesn't mean that it happens all of the time, but it's possible. Fees, by contrast, right? So fees are meant to generate revenue. They're not punitive in nature. They're literally present in every part of the criminal justice process, even pre-adjudication. What pre-adjudication means is before you're even found guilty, right? Or you're found innocent and the case is dismissed. Unfortunately, using fee revenue to fund the judiciary or any type of government service essentially distorts the fair administration of justice because it actually forces governments to bet on crime, meaning that you kind of want crime in order to raise money. And if you don't have crime, then you're not going to raise money. So this is sort of the difference. Are there any questions about the difference between fine and fee revenue? I see Bruce smiling too, so I don't know if he has any comments sort of about the difference between these two or how they interact.
I was laughing because I had experience in Cuba, which is the second largest city in New Mexico for speed traps. So that's why I was laughing.
Yeah, right. So it's something that a lot of us have experienced. A lot of us have experienced that within the traffic context. So we have some, there's a lot of stories around it. The other thing that we'll talk a little bit about is restitution. Restitution is something entirely different. And the idea is that it's compensation to a victim of crime for costs incurred as a result of that crime. That's the idea of restitution. Restitution is not a fine or a fee. It's something very different. In New Mexico, just to give you an idea of how fees or how often fees are in this system, we have it everywhere, right? There's electronic monitoring, there's drug testing, ankle monitors, sober links, urine analysis, ignition interlocks, evaluation, classes, counseling, pretrial services. All of these things you have to pay for, and that's pretrial. Then we talk about conviction. There's a whole host of conviction fees that are attached to every single conviction in this state and in our city. That includes for traffic offenses. Then if you're on probation, you have to pay all your fines, fees, and restitution. And you have to pay for electronic monitoring, classes, all of the things that you had to pay for pretrial. Then there's other fees that you can incur when you're in jail, right? There's communication fees, medical care fees, commissary. So, standard hygiene products. You have to pay for all of these things, right? And in some jurisdictions, not in the city of Santa Fe, thankfully, there are things called booking fees. And these do exist in the state of New Mexico where you actually have to pay to stay. So if you get picked up, you're arrested and they book you into the jail, you have to pay $25 to stay. And if you don't have money on you, then they keep that on your books. So that means that if you get rearrested, let's say a family member then puts money on your books so you could buy soap, tampons, ramen noodles, they will actually take that money out of your commissary account to pay for your booking fee, for your previous booking fee and your current booking fee. There's also fees attached to things that I would say are sort of quasi-criminal. They're like civil fees that are adjacent to the criminal process. And this is driver's license reinstatement fees, towing and booking fees, and impound fees. In my experience as a public defender, I very frequently experience clients who would abandon their vehicles after they were impounded. Most of my clients, their vehicles were probably the most valuable possession that they actually owned. So when that was taken and they could no longer afford, they couldn't afford to get their vehicle back, they just left it there. So it literally drove them deeper into poverty. So these are some of the, and oh, I'm sorry, there's one other sort of bucket of fees, which are bench warrant fees. New Mexico has one of the highest bench warrant fees in the country. It's $100 every time a bench warrant fee is issued, and that's for failing to appear to a court hearing or when you can't pay. So if you even just miss a payment, they can issue a bench warrant and you can be charged another $100 on top of whatever else you owe. So I just wanted to provide some context of how deep this system is, and give you a little bit. I'm going to give you one little statistic that's useful for this. And while it doesn't deal with the city of Santa Fe, it deals with Santa Fe County and the state in general. So from 2012 to 2016, and this is across district, magistrate, and metro courts, almost $18 million in jail credits were issued. So what that means is that individuals owed that amount of money and they actually chose jail instead of paying it. And it's not that they chose it, it's that they literally didn't have the money to pay those and they went to jail instead. This is $18 million that the state never collected. And instead what the state did is they doubled down and paid for those individuals to then be incarcerated to quote unquote pay that off. So this is sort of the kind of perverse practice and really nonsensical practice of fee assessment and or attempt at collection that is going on across the country. There's a variety of reforms that are going on, and we have some wonderful people today to talk about how they've been whittling away at this system through their city and county work. So I could go on and I'll bore everybody about this in a couple of weeks. But I'd love to have everyone introduce themselves and chat a little bit about what they were able to do. So I'm going to, and I'll just call on folks if that works. I'm going to start with Katie Hurley.
Hi, thanks so much. I'm so happy to be here. I think I have about 10 minutes for my kind of discussion, so I'll try to get through everything in that period of time. So I work at the King County Department of Public Defense. I'm our special counsel for criminal practice and policy. And I've worked here in Seattle, King County for almost 16 years. I've spent most of my time representing clients in court, mostly in juvenile court, defending kids charged with crimes, and then also worked in adult court for some time as well, and now focus on a lot of policy work. And so some of my work has centered around fines and fees reform, specifically around restitution. And the reason we decided to focus on restitution was because we've actually made, like listening to you talk about kind of the situation in New Mexico, I think we've made a lot of strides in Seattle and King County around fines and fees. Like in my entire career as a public defender, I think I saw one client issued a fine on a case and I was like in complete shock. I remember at the time I was like, oh my God, it was stunning to hear the judge impose the fine. Really stunning. Like we certainly, and then fees, there's been a lot of work over the years to try to reduce those. We still see them imposed for things like pretrial supervision in adult court and areas like that, but we don't see things like the bench warrant fee you were talking about. Anyway, so over time, we've been somewhat successful in addressing a lot of the kind of fees reform, I would say, not entirely successful, but certainly made significant strides. And a lot of the fees that remain are state level fees that are kind of non-discretionary, and so they may be changed, but would require state legislation to change them. And so we decided to really focus on restitution because it was an area where we saw our clients having restitution imposed on them, and also an area where, you know, we hear very often about how the criminal legal system isn't serving the needs of harmed parties. And I think restitution is a really good example of that, right? So someone will be found guilty, the court will order restitution of $300 to pay to the harmed party. And then the harmed party will never see that money, right? The person doesn't have the ability to pay. Nobody thinks they have the ability to pay. And so the harmed party is also kind of like given a promise that they'll get this money, but then never actually receive that money. And so and then our clients can see kind of really negative consequences of that, right? They may not be able to get their case diverted. They may not be able to get their case dismissed. They may have different kind of pathways or case benefits cut off to them because they're not able to pay the restitution obligation. And so we started doing work in King County really in 2020, where we were starting a youth community response for, there's always been a lot of kind of or increasing amounts of community responses for young people in King County. But this one really was broader in scope. The one we started recently called Restorative Community Pathways, and also handled felony level cases as well, kind of varying degrees. But one key part of that was that the prosecutor said that before they would kind of agree to this additional community response, they really wanted a government funded restitution account. So this is something that really in a lot of ways came from our prosecutor's office to say that they wanted the burden not to fall to the kid and their family because everyone knew that they couldn't pay that. But they still wanted to see the harmed party, you know, have their material needs met as well. And so we started to think about this idea as having restitution paid for, or a restitution fund that was funded by the county. And so that was a key kind of part of this. And it was much better for the harmed party, right? Because they would have their material needs met. It would be done much earlier in the process instead of waiting months or years. Of course, a lot of times the process was hard for the harmed party, right? You would have someone like me, a defense attorney, saying, like, well, I don't think you really should get that amount of money for your cell phone. You know, I found it on eBay and you can get it for, you know, $300 instead of the $600 you're asking for. So, you know, it was not, you know, it's an important process for us to do, but it was not a very good response for the harmed party. And so this way they could have a better, earlier response closer in time when they actually are suffering the loss. And at the same time, it's not a burden that's attaching to our client. And so we started this, I think it was, you know, it was pretty exciting. We started this in 2020 for young people. You know, we got the funding for it and then have been kind of implementing it, started to get implemented in 2021. But then based on the work that we've done with young people, we started through this fines and fees work to also specifically target the city of Seattle and to say that not only should there be kind of this victim compensation available through the youth kind of response, but it should also be available in the adult system as well. And so we worked, you know, we gathered a bunch of data, which I wasn't really, it was a much more concerted effort, I would say, than in juvie the youth program, when it was part of like a much larger initiative. This was like a very specific targeted approach with this victim compensation fund in Seattle. And so we really got a lot of data about how much our Seattle Municipal Court was collecting in restitution each year, how much they were imposing, how often it was imposed, what was the max amount, what was the mean amount, you know, all these kind of different pieces like that to really get a sense for if they were to fund a restitution amount, how much should it be? How much of the restitution would that cover? And just kind of like what sort of impact would it make? And so we kind of came together, collected that data. We worked at the time really collaboratively with our city attorney's office to make this recommendation to the city council, really, that they should adopt $100,000 victim compensation fund to kind of respond to and to really prioritize, you know, look at those situations where the imposition of restitution was that it was happening, and it was also harming the individual in some way, right? That the individual who was charged, right? They were not able to go to a diversion program, maybe because of it. They couldn't finish. We have something called community court, which you all may have. They couldn't finish community court, right? It was kind of impacting them in some way. So we really, had to focus on that as well as a way of both meeting the needs of the harmed party and also how we can reduce the harm of the criminal legal system. And so looking at it kind of from both of those lenses, I think was important. And then we're able to get that funded. But now I've been, of course, now working on, the devil is always in the details. So trying to figure out what the implementation looks like, what's the max, can people appeal? What is the mechanism for how they're going to get that? It was really very important that, our community partners have been leading these efforts here in Seattle and King County and really demanding a less harmful criminal legal system and better response. And so, we have a part of our fund was really stressing that the community needed to be kind of involved with initially with how the funds would be dispersed, understanding that a lot of harmed parties don't feel comfortable necessarily interacting with the government agency, right, to administer a victim compensation fund. And so thinking of it through that lens, and then hopefully one day moving this out of the kind of government administration piece and having a community organization be able to administer the fund itself, which is what we have with the juvenile response, so that it can be, hopefully much more tied in with the community, much less kind of a vestige or part of the government legal system response, but making sure that we're able to do it in a way that meets the needs of the of harmed parties, and also does it in a way that's can also mitigate or kind of help someone avoid the criminal legal system process entirely. So I feel like I've talked for a while now, really fast. So I apologize for going so fast, but really eager to hear kind of any questions people have.
Thank you, Katie. And you did great. You were just, and I think, we're going to change up the format just a little bit, just because we have Katie and Umi who are going to be leaving a little bit early. So what I'm actually going to do is we'll open it up for a couple of questions, if there are any questions on the restitution fund, and we'll do the same, Umi, for you, so that people can actually interact with you a little bit before you have to leave. So I have a question for you. It seems like we have, I'll put it in the queue. We have a couple other questions. My question is, so with the restitution fund, is this it's just for juveniles, and it's from anything from misdemeanors to felony level, or what are you guys looking at?
Yeah, so there's two funds. One is for youth, and that's solely as part of a diversion, a community response. And so that's for kids who can be charged with anything from misdemeanor shoplifting to first time kind of lower level robbery cases. And so, or residential burglary. So it's pretty broad who is able to, who can potentially fit into that community level response. And so there's that restitution fund, which I think is 100, but it was part of a much larger kind of budget proposal. And so I'm not exactly sure how much money it ended up being, because it was part of the whole infrastructure that was created for our community response based on a model of divestment from the juvenile legal system, and really shrinking that system to pay for this community response. And then separate from that, so we use kind of that work to launch, to start working on the Seattle Victims Compensation Fund, which is focused on misdemeanors, and that's at $100,000. And so that is the one that that's kind of still in the process of being, I would say, more formed to kind of, working out some of these final details. But so there's two separate funds, one, and then there's also a third fund, which I didn't talk about, which is a King County adult fund for this, a new community response called the Community Diversion Program. But that one is set up pretty similarly to the youth response. So there's a couple kind of county programs that are really focused on this pre-filing diversion level work. We don't really like to call it a diversion in the youth scheme, because we really like to think of it as the primary response, and that the system should really be very rarely kind of turned to. And in the Seattle Municipal Court space, the Seattle space, it's kind of much more, much broader the types of cases it can apply to. It's not just in the kind of community response arena.
That's great. Thank you. And Renee?
Yeah, I just had a quick question because I'm always curious where the money comes from. Do you know where the city council funded it? Is that through general funds or was there another source of funding that you can?
I think it was general fund for the city council. For the county council, we really, it was really a divestment model for the juvenile piece. So we said, and that's one way to do these funds, to really say we want to incentivize a diversionary response. And in order to incentivize that, we're really going to make sure we're meeting the material needs of harmed parties. And we're going to make sure we do that by giving the system less money, because we're going to give this community response more money. And so it's much better from our perspective. It's much better to, instead of spending the money on me, a public defender, to kind of fight a harm that's the government's trying to, from our perspective, cause a client, much better to spend that money on meeting kind of the needs of the individual, meeting the material needs of the harmed party. And so with the diversion program, kind of diversion fund, it really was a cut to the system to say, well, yeah, there's going to be fewer cases because of this program. So that means fewer public defenders, fewer juvenile probation counselors, less money for the infrastructure. We're going to use that money to pay for navigators for kids, navigators for harmed parties, the Restitution Fund, like a backup fund for people to help, kids and families meet their material needs. And so it was this really, this very principled decision to say that, with limited funds, we want to really use those funds to meet these kind of much earlier in the process kind of goals, and say that these should be prioritized rather than kind of spending money later on in the process. And I won't say that that wasn't done without controversy, right? It was a big deal, I will say. And, people were, not everyone was universally as thrilled about the decisions that were made about how it would be funded. But I think it was really the right decision to kind of go through that divestment model and incentivize diversion and kind of meeting people's material needs that way.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Bethany, I know your hand is up, so I want you to ask your question, but then we need to get to Umi because Umi needs to leave. So thank you.
Yeah, of course. I wasn't sure if I was allowed to ask questions too. So
you are definitely allowed to ask questions. You're a guest.
Okay. So my real question was about the money, but since Renee, you took care of that already, I want to know about the controversy with the money, because that seems to be my entire career on council has been just controversy trying to get people to do basic things for our community. So what my question, I guess, specifically is did you sell this divestment model to council members as a package deal with other things, or did you do individually? Did you say, okay, we want to start with this and then we'll bring you other things down the line, or was it kind of you agree to everything and then we implement it piecemeal?
So I would say, so the budget came from the exec. This was one of the exec's priorities for we want to fund, I think it was $6 million for this restorative community pathways program. And the idea was that the exec would, it wouldn't be entirely paid for by divestment in the first couple of years, but that there was going to be projected cuts to some probation and defense within kind of that first biennium. And then it was understood that there would be kind of, as the system wound down, because there'd be a much larger community response, that more and more kind of divestment could happen. And so it was projected that some would be kind of recovered in the first we do our budgets in 2-year blocks. And so it's projected that some would be recovered in that first biennium, and that even more in the next biennium as fewer cases were being processed through the system. I don't know if that answers your question, but it was, yeah. And so for example, our probation department wanted to be a part of the diversion, and a lot of they wanted to be supervising it, right, or doing the assessments, things like that. And there was really a really strong call from the community to say that it shouldn't be the government that's trying to meet the needs of people. It should be community organizations, and that probation shouldn't be funded to do that work. And so the prosecutor's office decided that they weren't going to that probation wouldn't need to monitor the diversions here. Instead, we were going to really fund the community to do that work.
Thank you so much, Katie. So we're going to move on to Umi Grigsby. So Umi, please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about the work that you've done in Chicago.
Thank you so much, Monica, and thank you guys for having me here and all of us here. So my name is Umi Grigsby. I'm currently the Chief of Staff at the Chicago Foundation for Women. Previously, I worked at the Office of the City Clerk of the City of Chicago as her Chief of Policy and Advocacy. And just to show you a little bit of the overlap of, criminal justice and fines and fees, I was also previously an Assistant State's Attorney. So I was a prosecutor prior to that with Cook County here in Illinois. So just right off the bat, I'm not speaking on behalf of either the City of Chicago, Cook County, or Chicago Foundation for Women, but I would like to talk a little bit about our journey in fines and fees reform. So in the City of Chicago, of 2.7 million, only because I took notes that we needed to tell you, the size of the city that we're working with. There are 3 citywide electeds, and they are the mayor, the treasurer, and the city clerk. Now, the city clerk not only is sort of the secretary for the city council, but she also collects what we call what is our wheel tax, which is the city sticker. So around 2018, which is before my tenure as Chief of Policy and Advocacy, WBEZ, ProPublica, and a couple of our advocacy groups, including Kofi, had put out information and reports about the city sticker ticket debt being the #1 driver of debt for Black and Brown communities in the South and West sides of Chicago. And knowing that City Clerk Ana Valencia brought together a working group in December of 2018 that was a cross-section of community groups. We had academia represented in the form of University of Chicago, and Loyola. We also had aldermen at the table, nonprofits and philanthropy at the table, as well as the head of different city departments, including the Department of Finance, the Office of Management and Budget. Because one of the things that should also be clear is that while the city clerk sells the city sticker, the Department of Finance collects or enforces the city sticker ticket. So the revenue that's coming in is actually shared across different departments. So not just the city clerk department, but also across the city of Chicago. I hope that's, if that's confusing, I can clarify later. Or I'll just blame them because I don't work there anymore. So ultimately, after bringing together the working group and starting to talk about some of the issues and the burdens that was being imposed on the most marginalized communities, the clerk decided to put forth what was an amnesty month and to put forth a reduced term sticker. So the city sticker, I think, varies in amount depending on the size of your car, but for the most part, it's about $93. The city sticker ticket, though, for not having that is about $200. And then there are late fees and back charges if you don't have if you haven't purchased your city sticker, if you fall out of compliance. So ultimately, the city clerk decided that she was going to put forth an ordinance that was passed around a reduced term sticker, which is about 4 months. It was around $32. And then also is going to put forth an amnesty month. At the time, there was a mayoral election. The city clerk had spoken to all of the candidates who were running. And ultimately, when Mayor Lori Lightfoot was elected, they came together and talked about doing a joint reform and doing a joint amnesty month. And so what ended up happening was the city clerk was going to go first and do an amnesty month on back fees and late charges for the city sticker itself. Once people came into compliance, then they had the opportunity to have their city sticker debt, ticket debt completely forgiven for the month. So it ended up being, I believe we went in October, and then November or December, that was when the city took over with their amnesty month. So in that month, we forgave around, I have the number here, but around 11 million in city sticker debt, ticket debt. At that point, we then were selected as part of the fines and fees cohort, which lots of my partners are here today. And we decided, I think that one of the main reasons that we were selected is because not only do we have the Department of Finance and the Office of Management and Budget, but we also had the community groups, which was once still very invested in making sure that we carried things across the finish line. I think I sent some information about what we were able to put out in a report we were able to put out that was called Advancing Equity. And underneath that, we came up with 4 main umbrella recommendations. And those were essentially around creating a path to compliance, evaluating longstanding practices, improving access and awareness, and building equity and sustainability and viability. So ultimately, outside of that, we had, the city clerk also was a part of a group that was lobbying the governor around stopping driver's license suspensions. And so even though that didn't fall under what we were doing, we were able to say this is also a part of the problem, is that people weren't saying that they didn't want to pay or they didn't want to be in compliance. It was just impossible. You were basically trying to get money from a stone. I'm from Liberia, so I don't really know what these sayings are. I think it's something about not being able to get something from a rock or something like that. But ultimately, our argument all along was that people were not saying, you know, we don't want to be in compliance. People were just saying, like, it is impossible at this point for us to get into compliance because of all of the fees and all the barriers that are put up over time, that accumulate over time, that make it impossible for you to essentially catch up. And then if you compound that with the fact that you no longer have a driver's license, well then, especially if you live in the south and west sides of Chicago, then how are you supposed to get to a job? And how are you supposed to keep a job? And how are you supposed to do all of these things to allow you to get back into compliance? And so essentially the argument is that we're setting people up for failure. So we went through a collaborative process, not only within the city, but also with our community groups to come up with a list of reforms. And what ultimately came out of it is that we had payment plan reform. Sorry, I'm pulling up the final. We had eliminating driver's license suspensions for non-driving violations, reducing city vehicle sticker penalties, making payment plans more accessible, and boot reforms. But the parts that had to do with the city clerk's office specifically had to do with introducing what we call a fix-it ticket, which was accessible to everyone at least one time. So you were able to go in at least one time and have a ticket completely forgiven. We stopped the doubling of the city sticker ticket because not only was it $200, but if you weren't able to pay that in a certain amount of time, it went from $200 to $400. And so not only were you paying the $400 on the ticket because it was doubling, but then in order to get into compliance in the first place, there was like a $60 late fee, and then there were back charges every month that you were out of compliance. So it just became compounded, and you were essentially getting penalized on both sides, both with the clerk's office and also with the city of Chicago. I think that the best thing that we were able to do outside of the reforms, which is very important, was that we were able to ingrain the community groups and those who were most immediately impacted in whatever reforms we were putting forth. And I think that's something that the city has continued to do with different community groups, because what we realized is that when we weren't involving the community groups, it was really hard to get the word out about Amnesty Month. When we weren't involving the community groups, there were unforeseen consequences, which is that, even if you're saying, okay, we stopped the doubling of city stickers, people are just like, but look at all of these other things that, you're doing and all these other burdens. Some of the pushback that we got was, obviously there were aldermen that were saying things like, oh, I pay all of my tickets. I don't understand. It's not that bad. Why are they, quote unquote, not paying their tickets? Why is it so hard for them to do this? And not understanding that ultimately If you don't have $200 to pay for a city sticker ticket, then you probably don't have $400 to pay for that city sticker ticket. If you don't have $32 to pay for the reduced term sticker ticket, then you definitely don't have $32 plus $60 plus another $30 a month to pay to get back into compliance. And so that was something that we were able to really share with our Department of Finance and our Office of Budget and Management, that ultimately what seemed to be not that much money actually cumulatively was causing more harm than we expected. Another outcome, and another thing that I think the community groups were able to understand, is how the city was interpreting the data in order to make decisions around policies. I think that was another thing, is that like there's not a lot of transparency in the data that is available, and then there's not a lot of transparency in the way that data is being used. And I think that was another thing that we did, was we opened up the city to sharing the data with the community group so that we could go through this collaborative process of having both a community group say, okay, we understand that you want to get to here, but ultimately you're misreading this data point, or you're not taking into account, you're looking at an average, right? You're not necessarily looking into how this is felt across the city. Because if you look at, across the city of Chicago, a lot of times where you live has a lot to do with the economic, your economic sort of status or earning power. And so you can't make a decision or a policy that you think is solving a problem on the north side and expect it to not have a different impact on the south side. So one example is that when they first started to double the city sticker ticket debt, they thought that they were going for people in Wrigleyville, right? And we kept hearing this story about this phantom person in Wrigleyville that had this Porsche that they were hiding, in someone's, covered garage. And so, the idea was, if you double the city sticker ticket, we're getting those people. We're getting people in the Gold Coast that aren't paying for their city stickers because they're hiding their cars, in their garages, in their covered garages. But ultimately, what you weren't hearing people talk about is the fact that certain communities are over policed, and certain communities have more of a presence of police. And so therefore the enforcement wasn't necessarily happening in Gold Coast or in Wrigleyville. The enforcement was happening on the south and west sides. So I'll stop there. But I think what I'm most proud of is the way that we worked collaboratively with the community groups.
Thank you so much, Umi. Does anybody have any questions about, okay, it looks like we have a couple. And also, just for context, does everybody know what Wrigleyville's like, or the Gold Coast compared to the rest, compared to the South Side? I know that Bruce does, but Wrigleyville, that's where Wrigley Stadium is.
That's where the Cubs play, north side of Chicago. And
nice
Gold Coast is closer to the lake, and I mean, it's all in the name.
Yeah, exactly. The Gold Coast, exactly. So Emily.
Yeah, mute here. Thank you so much, Umi. I'm curious whether there's been any evaluation or sort of impact data collected and what that might look like, if there's been enough time yet to see the impact on those marginalized communities.
So one of the issues that we had first off, one of the reasons that we got our partners, our academic partners, was to be able to evaluate the impact that we're having over time. But once we started, then we had COVID hit. And so, everyone sort of came to the conclusion that we never really had like a control, right? Like we never really had like a optimal circumstances within which to figure out what the impact was. I think that data is being collected, and the collaborative is still working within, with the city. And so I'm hoping that maybe we'll get good data soon. Sorry, was that me?
Can you make sure to mute yourself? Bruce, can you mute yourself, please? Thank you.
Thanks, Bruce.
Thank you.
Sorry, Umi, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just saying that, so like the short answer is no, but hopefully we'll have the data soon to be able to report that.
I did have a question. I lived in Arlington Heights, so pretty much every city, collar cities of Chicago, they have a city sticker, and ours was pretty expensive too. My question is, the cities rely on that for revenue. They don't have it here. They don't have a city sticker here, but they get their revenue in other places. Gross receipts taxes. They tax services here in New Mexico. So when you're if you're trying to take away that sticker fee, was there any discussion on where those funds are going to come from, or did I miss that in your presentation?
No, I didn't get into that, but that was also the other argument. It was, we have a deficit. We, the money that comes in, the revenue that comes in, we use to, fix the roads. It funds different government departments, et cetera, et cetera. And so I think one of the things that was really great about being a part of the fines and fees cohort was just being able to explain in the first place that that's not that we shouldn't be balancing our budgets or balancing our books on the backs of people that can't pay in the first place, or backs of people who are already, suffering for a lot of other reasons due to historic disinvestment and other reasons. And so ultimately what we wanted to say is that not only does it not make sense morally for us to balance our budgets on the backs of people who can't pay, but also it just doesn't make sense because we're going to keep increasing the penalties, but ultimately we're increasing the penalties on people that we're never going to recoup that money from. And so that was kind of our argument in the first place. You're not getting that money back anyway. One of the issues that, even the community groups talked about was how far back were we going to go to get that money, right? And how much were we spending and hiring these third-party debt collectors to be able to continue going after people for years and years and years. And so it fell into the same category of like the driver's license suspension is how are you ever going to get ahead if there are just all of these barriers that are compounded and you just get to a point where you're just like, I give up, my car is impounded, my driver's license suspended, debt collectors are coming after me. I mean, even the credit cards, I think the credit card companies stop after 7 years. And, the city of Chicago does not have a statute of limitations on that. So that is something that we brought up in the first place is how are you getting that money? And if you are getting some of that money, what are you spending in order to get that money back?
And one thing that I'll add to that too, just to provide some New Mexican context, and also Umi, thank you so much. I know that Umi and Katie, you all might need to leave, so feel free to leave when you need to, but just to sort of reinforce and contextualize some of this stuff. There was a wonderful report that was done here in New Mexico by the Brennan Center for Justice, and what they found is that the cost of collections so far outweighs the actual revenue that you get. They found that in Bernalillo County alone, that the county spends $1.17 to collect $1 of revenue. So that, and it's one of the, and this particular report studied 3 different states and 3 different counties in each state, and Bernalillo County was the worst offender. They're the only one that was actually losing money going after these fees. So something that is often lost on, because it wasn't studied, right, on city and county governments is that cost of collections and sort of the cost shifting that happens. For example, counties here in New Mexico, counties are the ones that are in charge of the jails. Cities pay counties to house their, to house people. There's some very interesting cost shifting that goes on, and the county, so for example, some of the stuff that we've worked on at the state level, the counties have always been very supportive of the fine and fee reform movement here, because of how much money counties are spending incarcerating folks for failure to pay, and nobody ever sees this money. So it's this interesting conversation about moving costs, collections, and revenue around, where it may appear that we are losing money, but we're actually, or that the city's going to lose money if we change this, but we're actually losing money right now. So, and there's some other things like Santa Fe County, for example, not the city of Santa Fe, but Santa Fe County, they spend 41 cents to collect $1. So not as bad as Bernalillo County, but still not great. Still far exceeds what the IRS spends on collections for taxes. So it's an interesting way to sort of gauge how we're achieving these goals, right, of revenue and potentially public safety.
And Monica, I do have to run, but I also want to say just another shout out to the Fines and Fees Justice Center and to the cohort is that data is readily available, and they not only give you the data, but they help to give you other comparisons like Monica just did, so that you're able to make that argument. And having the community groups there that are feeling it in real time is just so much more effective in making that argument. But thank you guys so much for having me.
Thank you, Umi. We appreciate you. And Katie, also, I don't know if you're leaving as well, but we really appreciate your knowledge and expertise. And we hope to keep in touch.
Thank you. So moving on, Michelle.
Hi, everyone. So my name is Michelle Lau. I am a policy analyst with the Financial Justice Project in the City and County of San Francisco. So we are a team that's embedded in the Treasurer's Office, and our whole mission is to look at fines and fees and kind of look at the impacts on our city's residents. So primarily people with low incomes and communities of color. So we were established in 2017. So we've been doing this work for a while. And I'll touch on just some of the reforms, but there are kind of other things that we have been working on and that we've been able to accomplish. So just some context about San Francisco. We are both a city and a county. So that does give us a little bit more authority over some of the fines and fees that we're able to reform and work on. Our population is just under 900,000. And so when we got started in 2017, we brought together a task force of community members, our government partners, really just to hear about, you know, what are the fine and fee pain points that people were experiencing. And so that is really where we kind of take our cues and decide what to work on. So I think I'll talk about 3 of our reforms today that I think are potentially more applicable to cities who are working on fine and fee reform. And I'll also mention at the end some of the other work that we're doing in the criminal legal system, for example. So in terms of the 3 reforms, I'll go into a little bit more depth on. The first is towing and booting. The second is parking tickets. And the third is quality of life citations. So starting with towing and booting. So as I think Monica said at the beginning, towing is extremely expensive. If your car is towed in San Francisco, the base fine is about $550. From there, it can grow to, over $1,000 very quickly because there are all these storage fees and all these other things that kind of compound and add on top of that base fine. And so as Monica said, we found that 10% of people weren't getting their cars back from the tow lot. And that's presumably because, people couldn't afford to get them out. And again, getting towed can be just devastating for people who, like all of us, need our cars to get to work, drop their kids off at school, make appointments. And it's particularly devastating for people who are experiencing homelessness and potentially are actually living out of their vehicles, and that is their home that they might be losing to a tow. So we started working on this problem with our SF Municipal Transit Authority, or SFMTA, to do a few things. So we've been able to create a low-income discount for towing and booting. And so we've used 200% of the federal poverty line as our eligibility criteria. So that's about $27,000 for a single person and about $50,000 for a family of 4. And that covers about 25% of the households in San Francisco are under that 200% of the poverty line. So with the discount, the $500+ tow fine is reduced to $100, and the boot fine, which is about also over $500, is reduced to $75. So it's a pretty significant discount for people who really need their cars back and can't afford to pay that $500+ cost. The other thing that we've done is created a one-time-a-year waiver on tow and boot fines for people who are experiencing homelessness. And so that has been really helpful in terms of people actually getting to keep their homes. And a lot of the times, if someone is actually living in their vehicle, all of their belongings are in that car. So that is, towing and booting. We still continue to work with the SFMTA on all sorts of things related to towing and booting. We hear frequently from people that, even with the low income discount, they're not able to get their cars back. So it's still an area that we continue to work in. The second reform I'll talk about is around parking tickets, and kind of similar to what Yumi talked about with the payment plans. San Francisco has had a payment plan and a community service plan for a really long time. But the issue with it was that to get onto the payment plan, it was a $62 enrollment fee. And then for the community service plan, it was a $75 to $155 enrollment fee. And this is for, a parking ticket that might have been $100 or $200. So, you can imagine that someone who can't pay that $100 parking ticket probably can't pay their that enrollment fee. So we were able, again, to work with our MTA and reduce those fees significantly. So now it's a $5 enrollment fee for the payment plan and no fee for the community service plan. And the other thing that we did was lengthen the amount of time that someone had on their payment plan. So previously it was about 3 to 4 months for someone to make all of their payments. And now it's 2 years. So just giving people more time in order to make those payments. The other thing about the payment plan is that if someone, enrolls and successfully completes it, they can have all of their late fees waived. And so those late fees can actually double the price of the ticket. So that has also been helpful. And then the third one I'll talk about a little bit more in depth is around quality of life citations. So these are things for offenses like sleeping or camping where it's prohibited, blocking a sidewalk, loitering. Most of those tickets in California start at $200 and they can grow to $500 when someone can't pay. And before we started doing this work, police were giving out over 15,000 these types of citations a year. And, when you kind of think about who receives those types of citations, it is primarily people who are experiencing homelessness. Potentially, they're camping in a park because they don't, have anywhere else to go. And we have found that 90% of those quality of life citations go unpaid. So it's because people, again, can't pay those fines. And in particular, we heard a lot from community that those citations were going on people's records. They're creating barriers for people to get jobs, to get into housing. So again, really hitting people hard, just harder than just the paying the fine itself. So we worked with our district attorney's office and our traffic court, which is where all those citations roll up, and created something called the Connect program. So this allows people who are experiencing homelessness to connect to and receive 20 hours of social service, and then have all of those quality of life citations waived. So it's one way to try to engage people a little bit in services, and be able to help them clear their citations. And we also design that program and what a service is to be pretty flexible. So it can be something like case management or counseling, or maybe a medical appointment or something like that. But can also be receiving a meal or having a place to stay. So pretty broad in terms of what those services are. And then lastly, I'll just mention a few of the other things that we've worked on in the criminal legal system and are continuing to work on. So San Francisco was the first county in the country to get rid of all locally controlled criminal administrative fees. So the fees that were mentioned earlier around probation, we used to charge people $50 a month to be on probation, ankle monitor fees, alcohol and drug testing fees. We've also made jail phone calls free from our jails. We're about to launch a completely free tablet for incarcerated people. We've cut down a lot of our commissary costs, or costs that people pay for basic items in jail. We are starting to work on restitution, like King County and Seattle. And then just like a few other things outside the criminal legal system, we've eliminated overdue library fines because we've heard that people, people at a certain point, can't access the library anymore after they've accumulated a certain amount in overdue fines. And so once we got rid of that, people, lo and behold, came back to the library and could access really great resources there. And then we also have a program called SF Museums for All, which allows people who receive public benefits to go to a museum in San Francisco for free. So when you think about kind of what it costs to take a family of four, for example, to a museum, it could be over $100 in terms of those admission prices. But yeah, I'll stop there, and yeah, happy to answer any questions. I think Monica also shared kind of our website and some of the reports that we've produced as well.
Thank you, Michelle. Does anybody have any questions for Michelle? I will also say briefly that in the city of Santa Fe, we do have control for the municipal court. There are particular administrative fees that are controlled by the city in the form of conviction fees, some of the other types of probation fees, those sorts of things. A wonderful thing is that there is no cost to enter into a payment plan or in order to do community service. However, the length of time that you have in order to pay something off is fixed, and fees are not, conviction fees in particular, you cannot waive. So judges are not able to waive those, which means that you cannot reduce you cannot reduce fees based on somebody's ability to pay by statute for conviction fees in particular. That's really run by the state, but actually eliminating some city fees is a possibility. So Michelle, thank you so much. I know San Francisco has done so much work in this area. Does anybody have any questions for Michelle?
Mine's more of a comment. I know we've seen each other before and I've heard about the things you were doing before, but really everything I do in Allegheny County is just copying the work you're doing in San Francisco. So please keep it up because it gives me ideas every time. So thank you. Yeah.
Same. Renee?
Go ahead, Emily.
Emily, I'm so sorry I didn't see you.
Oh, no, that's okay. Just briefly, thanks, Michelle. I'm very, forward-thinking approaches. I'm curious, and maybe this is a question to everyone at the end, but whether, I was thinking when you were mentioning the homelessness issue and the citations for, let's say camping in the wrong spot, or has there been any discussions about actually doing away with those fines instead of having to figure out a way to offset the fines later or develop a special fund to help people pay? It just seems like for some of those real basic, like you mentioned, life, I don't know, what did you call it? Life, was that, sorry, Monica.
Quality of life.
Oh, quality of life fines, whether, you know, especially in, you know, big cities, whether that's on the table to reform.
Yeah, that's a super fair question. And I think definitely in terms of fees, I think want to get rid of kind of fees that just purely just generate revenue, especially off of poor community members. I think fines is a little bit trickier. I will say that with the quality of life fines, you know, that's kind of where we've been able to get with our court partners and with our DA's office. But yeah, would definitely love to see kind of, you know, other places decriminalize certain fines and or certain, you know, offenses. Yeah, that's kind of where we've been able to get so far.
And one thing too that's interesting about this discussion, much like traffic here in New Mexico, right, is the sort of the difference between decriminalization and legalization, right? So because we can decriminalize something, which I think is important, extremely important, because then you can no longer issue bench warrants, which is what we do here. Then we can issue a bench warrant and somebody can be incarcerated for something like that. I guess my follow-up question is has quality of life, these quality of life citations, are they decriminalized? Is it only in the civil context? And if somebody can't, like, for example, if somebody doesn't do the 20 hours, what happens? Is it that it's just sort of a civil process, or is it that there could be a bench warrant or the fear of jail?
Yeah, so in San Francisco, it kind of ends up in our traffic court system, so it's kind of outside the criminal process. We in San Francisco do not issue bench warrants, so that doesn't happen if someone kind of doesn't complete this. But yeah, I think that's a great question. Like, you know, what happens to that person if, you know, those fees or that fine is not paid off? I think it stays kind of with them until they're able to pay it off.
Right. So
we do, yeah.
So it stays in that civil context, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where there's other avenues to try and collect those funds through the civil process.
Right.
Just like any other debt.
Yes.
That's the way we should go, right? Just like any other debt. We don't need to criminalize people for not being able to pay for anything, right? That's sort of like the baseline of this work, is that why do we essentially incarcerate people? Because they can't pay. Sorry. There was another question. I got carried away. So Renee, thank you, Michelle.
Thank you, Michelle, for just the exciting things that you all are doing in San Francisco. And that's a challenging place in general, I feel like, just to try to make a living. So making these, what seems like no-brainer changes, I really appreciate that you're a part of that. I'm curious about the Connect program, and we actually have a Connect program as well. It's in a different context, but it is helping folks to kind of navigate some social services and ways that they can get support for whether it's housing or it's kind of full gamut. It's not connected to our court system or anything like that, but I guess I was curious too about how a person who checks like that they fulfilled the 20 hours, like how does that, because every time I think about government structures, it's so bureaucratic. So I'm like, how does someone make sure or are following, like, oh, they did this many hours for case management, they did this many for receiving a meal or a place to stay, and I'm like, who is the person that keeps track of that?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I just can't understand the structure, I guess.
Yeah, so in the Connect program, the DA's office has developed this kind of list of approved social service providers. So it's pretty broad. I think there are like 20 or so different organizations, and the service providers are the ones who are keeping track of the hours and then reporting that back to the DA's office. So that's kind of, yeah, the mechanism by which we track.
Okay, so service providers send a person in the DA's office, it's probably
Mhm.
assigned to this
Mhm.
program. And then they just let them know if they're fulfilling their
Yep.
hours. Okay. And then the other thing, I didn't catch the percentage. You said that for those quality of life citations that initially San Francisco, what was the percentage that weren't being paid?
90.
Wow. Okay. Thank you. I think that's it for now. I always have a lot of questions, but I know we have other folks that we want to make sure to get to in a timely manner. So thank you, Michelle.
Thank you.
So we are finally with Allegheny County. Am I saying that right? So we have two folks from Allegheny County, and I'm going to let you all share the stage to talk a little bit about what you've been able to do in Pittsburgh. Do you guys not like it when people refer to it as Pittsburgh? Is that?
No, we only don't like it when people call it Allegheny instead of Allegheny County, because no one does that here, and every other county in the world is like just the name. But Pittsburgh, I mean, me and Brad both live in Pittsburgh.
Okay, great, awesome. So please, if you both could introduce, yes, Brad, please.
Oh, no, I would just say, and I think Bethany will touch on it, when you call it Pittsburgh, I think it actually does give undue weight to the city of Pittsburgh, which itself is relatively small and doesn't do social services. Allegheny County, which is large and has a budget of over $1 billion and has a county executive who is relatively anonymous even after 12 years. So, Allegheny County, 1.9 million, Pittsburgh, 300,000 people. And if it's a bad winter, probably under that. So
When Brad says anonymous,
talk
he
about
means evil.
but it's the county that makes a difference.
Well, perfect. See, that's why I asked, because I know that, I would feel a certain kind of way. We get that way about New Mexicans. So that's why I like to say that and see what the response, what your reaction is. So, but it gives everybody some context, right? Where is Allegheny County? What are we talking about here? So I'm so excited you both are here. You guys are quite the dynamic duo. So,
And we were already plotting who was going to say what if the one person went before the other. So this is perfect.
now you guys can just feed off of each other.
Yeah. So I guess, Brad, you want me to start, because I think what I'm going to talk about kind of segues into your audit talk.
Sure. And I think what you have to say is more exciting and dynamic, and who wants to listen to audits anyway?
Okay, I disagree, but okay, I will go with that. So, hello everyone. My name is Bethany Hallam. As I said, I'm coming to you live from beautiful Pittsburgh. So Pittsburgh is our city center in Allegheny County. I am the at-large council member for Allegheny County. So I am one of 2 Allegheny County council members that represents all 1.2 million people in Allegheny County. So people always think Pittsburgh. I'm very Pittsburgh, but really, Pittsburgh has a population about 300,000 out of our 1.2 million. So it's really most of my jurisdiction is outside of the city of Pittsburgh. So, I mean, I am watching that timer because I could talk about this stuff for 5 hours, but I won't do that to any of you. So, in addition to being a council member, a lot of the work that we do is rooted in my past. I am a formerly incarcerated person. I did multiple stints in our county jail, and life has come full circle where now I am on the oversight body of our Allegheny County Jail. So I do a lot of work around jail reform, but when you think about it, what's the best way to reform the jail is to keep people out of it in the first place. Hence why I just finished my first year of law school. But we are doing a lot of work to not just keep people out of jail, but then to also try to make it a little less horrible when you're in there. You're never going to make jail a great place to go. And it always breaks my heart. I think it was Umi who was talking about people who take the jail time over the fines and fees. People do that here too. We've never, that I know of, analyzed how many people take that option, but it happens. And so, what is that saying? That people would rather lay on a cold floor without any hygiene products or proper food than pay a fine. It's because they can't. So I'll talk about some of the reforms we've been able to achieve because I am so excited about it. And I think it's important to start off by noting that when people think of Allegheny County, they think Pittsburgh, and they think this is like some progressive utopia of like great, awesome things that we're able to do all the time. And the reality is, most of I don't want to say most, a fair split of Allegheny County is conservative, right? You have to look at it as a whole picture, because a lot of the work I do isn't just like, hey, here's this great idea, because I already told you I take those all from Michelle. But really, it's about how do I convince people who maybe don't care about the humanity of assessing unnecessary fines and fees, who probably don't care about the people in the jail. I've heard them talk about it, they don't. But talking about this in a way that makes sense to everyone, and not just abolitionists, and not just folks, who are working in criminal defense or other areas of the criminal legal system, keeping people out of it. There's a way to talk to it that gets even the most conservative. I mean, I even have, law enforcement officers who are very big proponents of these things that we've done. And I'll tell you why. So one of the first reforms we did, and this was early on in my tenure, I was on council for 2 months when COVID hit. And so, all of these grand ideas that I've had my whole life to implement, it really turned into, listen, that stuff goes on the back burner. We're talking about life or death survival mode right now. And so, one of the first things we did in regards to fines, fees, and costs was at our Allegheny County Jail. So we have what's called an Incarcerated Individuals Welfare Fund. And if you have never heard of that, you should check and see if your jurisdiction has it, because most either counties or states across the United States have some variation of what used to be called an Inmate Welfare Fund. So we have this fund. It used to be funded by the profits made off of commissary purchases and jail phone calls. Over the years, they took out the jail phone call profits because, they wanted to put those in their pockets themselves. Our county makes a 69% commission on jail phone calls. So they could make the cost 69% cheaper tomorrow if we just eliminated the profits, right? In addition to that, the commissary account, that is still in there. So the profits made off of commissary still goes in this Incarcerated Individuals Welfare Fund. So when I came onto council, it was hovering around $3 million, and it was just going up. And they were using it to spend it on, Christmas gifts of shampoo and soap, various things that we have argued, various services in the jail should be covered by the county budget and not profits made off commissary. But what we decided to do is, about a month after COVID hit, so this was April, maybe our May Jail Oversight Board meeting, I introduced a motion to put $50 on the commissary accounts of each and every person in the jail, and $50 on the tablet accounts of each and every person in the jail. Our population hovers around 1,600 folks in the jail at any given time. And so, while our goal is to do, what they're doing out in San Francisco and eliminate the cost for phone calls, provide free phone calls, we also have tablets. We're just another layer of the racket that are jails and prisons. We have tablets where you can FaceTime home, text home, but costs a ton of money to do so. So we put $50 on the commissary account and $50 on the phone/tablet accounts every single month. And so then over time, we've now condensed it. They made those accounts the same thing. So we give $100 a month, same amount of money, but you can decide if you have no one to call, you can use it all on commissary. If you don't want to eat commissary, talk to your family, see your kids a little more on the FaceTime, right? So that is something that I am most proud of. And it's so wild because they haven't yet realized like what we're doing, right? We're taking the money that we make off of incarcerated people that we should never be making off them in the first place, and we're putting it right back into their pockets. Because remember, it is not the people who are incarcerated who are harmed when they need money on their books. It's their family at home. These were folks who just lost their jobs due to COVID. Kids were home from school. Everything was blowing up in their faces. Folks were getting evicted left and right, being forced to, sell their cars or move out of their homes. The last thing that they should have had to worry about was to take care of their loved one on the inside. And so we wanted to take that burden, not just off the incarcerated individuals, because even our workers, we have incarcerated workers, they make $0 an hour. You might hear like 13 cents, 25 cents, 30 cents and think that's ridiculous. In our county jail, they make 0 cents. And so every single penny was coming from the outside. So that's the thing I'm really most proud of, because it has happened every single month since May 2020. We have given out this money, and guess what? There is still $3 million in that fund somehow, because that's how much of a racket is. You know, I always try to talk about how people talk about private jails and private prisons. What they mean is for-profit jails and for-profit prisons. Every single jail and prison is a for-profit jail or prison, because the county, the state, the Commonwealth, the city, whatever it is making money off of the people on the inside, whether it's the things that we've talked about today that all cost a lot of money, or the commissary phone calls and all of that. So, you know, we kind of got into that by just going into the jail and talking to people who are incarcerated. As a jail oversight board member, I can show up at the jail anytime, any day, unrestricted, walk through, talk to anybody, and I take advantage of that. And so we've been in the process of doing a needs assessment survey on the incarcerated population with the University of Pittsburgh School of Public Health. But it's just taking forever. So we decided we'll just go in and ask ourselves what it is that they need. And overwhelmingly, when I come up to the cell door, or I'm sitting down at a table with them while they're eating a meal, and I say, you know, what can I help you with? And they're like, well, can you introduce us to that girl that's been giving us $100 a month? And I'm like, guess what? That's us. So like, we've been doing that. And so for them to be able to see people who are fighting for them, you know, I spent some time in jail. I've been in jail multiple times. The longest time was for about 6 months, but I've spent many 2, 3, 4 night stints in jail. And the worst thing is feeling so alone. You know, when you're trying to pick up that phone and no one's answering, when mail is called and nobody sent you a letter, when it's visiting time and people promised you they'd be there and they wouldn't, you know, that's the worst feeling in the world. So more than anything, we had to show these folks that we're fighting for you. We care about you. You can come to us, because unlike, I think it was Katie who talked earlier about their cooperative executive, I mean, we just don't have that here, right? And so it's a bigger fight, and I don't know what your situation is, what kind of, you know, makeup of your legislative bodies you're working with, but it's a lot easier when you have an executive who's just like, oh yeah, that's a good idea. You don't need to vote on that. I'll just do it. And so we don't have that here. So everything is an uphill battle, but there's 9 people on the jail oversight board, so I only need 5 votes there, and there's 15 members of county council, and I need 8. So, you know, that's the way that we've been doing things. You know, as part of the cohort, we, you know, got to talk to so many folks from so many different jurisdictions, and we are trying to figure out the way to address our fines and fees injustices here in Allegheny County. And so, you know, Brad's going to talk a little bit about the audit that was done to find out about how much do we collect, how much do we spend collecting. But I just want to talk about like what we did to kind of try to resolve this. So the first thing we did is we talked to our local magisterial district judges. And I think you mentioned earlier, Yins also have magisterial district judges in Santa Fe.
We have magistrates and we have municipal court. The city has control over the municipal court, but not the magistrate at the county level.
Yeah, our magistrates are actually under the jurisdiction of the state, even though they're like our local magistrates. But again, we elect them all. So they work with us. And so we got a group of magistrates together and they said, hey, we're in. We kind of sold them on this idea of we want to have fines and fees forgiveness clinics. So, you know, ours are district magisterial district judges, and our president judge of our, you know, Court of Common Pleas gave unilateral authority to the first one, the pilot one, that anybody who came into his courtroom on this given day or time, this judge could wipe out any fines and fees and convert them to community service, not just in his jurisdiction of his district, but anyone in the whole county could come to him. And again, all that took was one magistrate and one judge, and we were able to change the lives of anybody who showed up. Since then, because it was so successful, we're now piloting that with other magisterial district judges. I literally have a lunch meeting tomorrow with 3 of them. And it was such an easy fix. It's just nobody gave them the opportunity to do it. So that's the first thing we're doing. The second thing is that we are working because we have a unique clause in we are a second class county in Pennsylvania. And so there is the second class county code that actually allows our clerk of courts unilateral authority to wipe out local fees that are assessed by the courts, which I don't need to tell anyone on this call, right? You get a ticket, it says it's $25, and then magically it turns up to $400 by the end of the edition on the ticket. And so all of that other stuff can be wiped out by one single person who is appointed by our county executive. So, that's another avenue as well that we have tried to explore, but it doesn't look like that's going to go well. But I wanted to tell you all about that because you might have that in your code as well, and you might have a cooperative clerk. So look into that. And then the third thing, which is really finally happening this week, is with the grant award from Fines and Fees Justice Center and San Francisco Policy Link, were able to coordinate with the public defender's office, and which again, that sounds so easy when I hear other folks talking about it today. That was such a battle. So our charter actually prohibits any council member from talking to any directors of departments. And with an, I know, don't get me started on it. But it really is a burden because as you all talked about, like community, we have community members involved. We wanted county community. We wanted, the district attorney to be on board, the public defender. We wanted everyone to be like, yeah, we have to do something about this injustice. And so we realized that, hey, we can wipe out fines and fees if people go to these forgiveness clinics. We could convince our clerk of courts to wipe out all the local fees. What is the one thing that we can't figure out a solution to? It's restitution. And so, you heard a little bit earlier about restitution, but we decided to focus specifically on juvenile restitution. And so we've coordinated with the juvenile public defender director to actually identify $50,000 worth of restitution that was assessed against juveniles, and we're just going to pay it. We're just going to wipe it out. And we have been working with our community, the foundation community, basically anybody that has money that wants to help the community they live in. We will work with you because there's a lot more than $50,000 worth of juvenile restitution just in our county. And as I think was alluded to earlier, when these kids turn 21, any restitution that they have against them is converted to a civil judgment. So now they're going to get apartments and they're getting denied. They're going to get car loans and mortgages. They're getting denied. Sometimes they're going to get jobs and they're getting denied because they broke a car window when they were 12 years old and could never afford to pay for it. And the parents shouldn't have to pay for it because they didn't do it. So what is the solution here? There shouldn't be restitution for children, but we have victims who have damages. So the solution was, we're just going to pay it, right? These are kids who have been working so hard to make this go away, but are never going to be able to do it because every single step they take in life is being held back from this thing that happened 5, 10, 20, 30 years ago. And so we are paying $50,000 worth of restitution off for juveniles. And we have some partners who are cooperative with potential matching funds at a later date once we show the proof of concept. So we're including them all in this work from the beginning because they've been working with us on these fines and fees forgiveness clinics, getting the word out, finding folks to send our way for them. And it really takes a collaborative effort. But I want to stress that I think one of the things that has been missing from this conversation today is, man, is it hard? Right, is if you have a cooperative government, you have cooperative executive, you have a cooperative bureaucracy, which I feel like sounds like an oxymoron. But if you have that, sure, these changes, these reforms are going to be a heck of a lot easier for you to implement. But I'm just going to assume that everyone's isn't that easy because mine is hell sometimes, and it is a battle. And so to me, it's a lot about messaging, right? It's like, hey, you might be one of those people who could care less about somebody in the jail. You might be one of those people that thinks everybody that comes into a courtroom is a criminal, right? But what do you think about the victims? Because there are victims of these crimes who should have their damages rectified, but should we really expect a 10-year-old to pay for that? Should we really expect somebody to be punished for 40 years because they could never afford to pay $1,000? My cousin was just sent back upstate, I guess it's been 6, 7, 8 months ago, because of a $37,000 restitution that he has had for 20 years.
Oof.
20 years. He'll never be able to pay it. His mom's rich and she can't pay it. He's just stuck, and he has kids and a job and a family, and he's stuck. And he's going to have that following him for the rest of his life. No one's paying that. And so what we realized is there are so many people, in our average amount is, $1,000 to $2,000. And so we could change people's lives by just investing in them when everyone else wiped them out. When every other criminal legal reform that I've heard of is leaving out this thing of restitution because of the fact that it's actually a person who was financially harmed. There are damages and we can award those damage, but it shouldn't have to be that kid who does it. So I lied and said I was going to watch my time and totally didn't. So I'm going to say, Brad, can you talk about how much money Allegheny County is wasting? And then maybe we'll loop back for questions.
I also said that I was going to interrupt you and I didn't.
Oh.
But Brad, so you have 1 minute and 56 seconds to explain the audit, which I'm sure will be very easy.
I'll give the abbreviated version. Bethany really encapsulated, though, the uphill battle that we have every day. And I often feel like we're the Scooby-Doo gang, and our county executive is the unmasked villain who yells, "You meddlesome kids." The best way I could describe the fines and fees apparatus in Allegheny County is that it is a big, dumb machine that was constructed 50 years ago for a purpose that wasn't malign, that wasn't bad, that the creator thought was efficient. And then as the years go by, more people plug in other machines to this machine, and people really have forgotten why it was there in the first place. So in the county controller's office, where I was the chief legal counsel, I did the one thing that my office could do and to which we could devote resources. We're accountants in that office and auditors, and we counted. And we took upon the task of following fines and fees from their inception down through their collection. And we attempted to conduct really a performance audit of our assessment of fines and fees. Some highlights, and Allegheny County may be exceptional, perhaps in the numbers, but I think the concept probably translates throughout jurisdictions. Our accounts receivable in Allegheny County, over $400 million. That's 400 million. Everyone that I encountered was surprised. I don't think anyone had ever really put it together. That number goes back so far that no one can tell you when it first began to be an account receivable. It has just been carried over from the time we kept paper ledgers in the treasurer's office. Most of that amount, by far, is fees. And the average number of fees for any criminal offense in Allegheny County is approximately 12 total. Some have more, some have less, none has less than 5. So for instance, if you have a DUI and you run into some municipal property and it doesn't involve a personal injury, you're going to have fees that are paid into 17 different pots. Whether that pot belongs to the state or the county or the court system. So what that means is, the long and the short of it, and I could go into more detail if anyone has time on their hands to call me up, please do so. No one entity, save for probation, which is really a different system unto itself that does rely upon money coming in that's specifically earmarked for the budget. But take probation out. No one county or court function depends upon this money because it comes in drips and drabs and is a small amount. And so Allegheny County has a budget that approaches almost $1 billion. It's about $900 million. If you looked at, and I can't really break it into department level, but if I broke it into division level, I think I could say that no division or service relies on fees for more than 6% of their operating budget. So it's a small benefit to the individual service. But again, it is quite a burden. And we've heard that from community members, and I hear it everywhere, to the individual. And, you know, as I sped up here to our hotel in Lake Erie and pushing the gas down, had I got a speeding ticket, it would have been a bad day for me. And my wife would have gotten angry with me. But a bad day to me translates into a financial catastrophe for someone else, who then has to make the decision, how do I pay rent? How do I pay daycare? How do I pay food? And that's certainly what happens in Allegheny County. So while on the end of fines and fees, we weren't able to reform anything, we did present a pathway to some solutions. And we made a document that has indisputable facts. And I guess the one thing that I would hope would come of it is that we convince the judges who assess fees, because it is primarily fees, that the functioning of the world in which they reside does not depend upon them clicking the box that says fee to the computer infrastructure fund of the Court of Common Pleas, which was passed in 1980 when people were running mainframes that took up a whole room. And we had to convince people to pay for this newfangled gadget called a computer. But that's how long ago that fund was created. It's never going to be uncreated until people stop using it. So by this sort of work, I hope, you know, and I also think that we could ask at budget hearings, ask the people coming before legislative bodies, you know, does your budget and operation depend on the collection of fee revenue? And if the answer is, I don't know, or I'll check and see, you know, then probably they don't really depend on it. And that to me is what just makes the system so bad and so dumb that it ruins people's lives for no good reason. I mean, at least if we had some evil villains in the plot that said, aha, we're really getting them, at least somebody has a rationale, an ideology, but it's just the way that it always was, which
And
is
Brett,
a really dumb reason. That's it.
And that's exactly how it is in New Mexico, though. That what we find is that when you look at the state system, the way that fees are actually collected, and COVID was an interesting experiment. We don't have all the data that we need for this, but talking to the administrators of these conviction fee funds here, because of fee, the way it travels through all these different hands, and there's payment plans, and it's a very slow drip process that you describe. People that, you know, we weren't actually really collecting any of that revenue during this period, and the sky didn't fall. We still had all of these services. And yes, there was lots of other problems with public health, but as far as the things that the fee funds fund, they are still in existence because they're not only reliant on this particular pot of money. But yet you are so correct. What it does to people's lives is tremendous in the way that it destroys them. I really appreciate everything that all of the wisdom that you guys bring from Allegheny County, not just Pittsburgh. And does anybody have any questions for them? I know we have just a little bit of time left, and but I want to see if we have any questions for either of them. You guys were extremely thorough. I'll just reinforce one thing, and that has to do with communication. I think it's wonderful what you guys are doing, and the way that you set that up, Bethany, that we want to keep people out of jail, but if people do have to go to jail, we want to make it a little bit less miserable. And the way that the burden and the cost, who it really falls on, and it falls on families. And here in New Mexico, it primarily falls on women. Families, these are mothers, aunties, grandmas, right? And Yes, kids, exactly. And all of the research shows that when people that are inside have contact with their loved ones, they feel better, they do better. It also increases safety for other inmates and for the staff at the jail and in the prisons. And when COVID hit, they completely shut off in-person visits. In-person visits are free. You know, what's not free are phone calls or tablets. Not all the jails here in New Mexico have tablets. There are a few,
Don't get them. Do not get them. It's a scam.
MDC does, our largest jail in the state, but that's not what we're talking about today. But the fact that we charge so much money for a phone call, something that we all know isn't that expensive, it's a problem, and it's an interesting problem, even though the city doesn't have that. So I think it's wonderful. Some of the things that you were doing, and doing an audit is a huge, huge deal. Thank you so much, everybody, for coming. Oh, and it seems like Renee, please.
Yeah, I mean, I always think about things that like process and how it all works, and we probably won't have time, but remind me, what's second class county code? What is that again? Second class county code. Did I get that right?
Yeah, I mean, I don't really, my knowledge outside of Pennsylvania isn't as expansive. But we have class code, like each county, each city is like a first class city, first class county, second class city, second class county. Do you have that? Like, do you have any way to say like, this is a different county than this county within New Mexico?
We have something called a home rule municipality.
Yeah.
So meaning if you have a home rule municipality, so in the fines and fees context of a home rule can have their own fees, their own conviction fees. Santa Fe is a home rule municipality, so we get to make up our own fees on top of the state fees at the point of conviction. The municipal court, there will be fees that go to the state, and then there'll be fees that go to the city.
So we are also home rule in Allegheny County, but that is separate from this. This is, I mean, that doesn't say that in our home rule charter, that this specific thing, it's any second class county. We just happen to be the only second class county in Pennsylvania. And so it only applies to our county. And so basically there's this position called the clerk of courts. And what did it used to be called, Brad? Because it actually used to be called something else.
It used to be called the prothonotary. And Harry Truman famously said once when they introduced him to the prothonotary, what the hell is a prothonotary? But he is the recorder and keeper of, he or she, the recorder and keeper of all court documents. So then when the Allegheny County Home Rule Charter did away with all elected officials to put vast power into the county executive, the prothonotary and the register of wills and the real estate person became a department of court records.
And the clerk of courts is the person who is in charge of that department. The second class county code specifically allows that person to have this jurisdiction. It is wild. When I told him about it, he didn't even know about it. So we found it literally just by trying to look for creative solutions to addressing fines and fees. And we just had folks like digging through the, state statutes and county codes and home rule charters to try to figure out like, what unique authorities do we have that we don't even know about yet? And so that's where we discovered that our second class county code. So I guess for you, if you don't have that, it would either be A, in your charter, in your home rule charter, or B, a New Mexico statute that would say there is this person that exists that can eliminate all fees.
And state statute specifically says that judges may not, they shall not ever suspend, defer, or amend any fees, which is something we're working on in the state level. That we're taking away we're taking away judges' discretion. Judges should be able to assess, to really do an ability to pay assessment.
Are your judges elected?
Magistrates are, yes. Yeah, they are. District court also, actually.
Okay. Yeah, because remember, there are elections. Elections have consequences, and you can hold people accountable when you go to vote for them, whatever party you choose to vote for.
That's right.
But yeah, so that's what that is. And again, we are the only second class county in Pennsylvania. So I don't even have another example of being like, hey, these folks did it because we're the only people that have this authority because we're the only second class county.
Yeah, I
and
think
really just it's not even so much for him to just flip a switch and then no fees would exist anymore, but it's to give that individual the discretion to right-size things for citizens to meet their needs and the needs of the community, so that every month, perhaps, the clerk of courts could have a hearing date and attempt to work out payment plans with people. And so that would be if we had a cooperative county executive, as we put in our audit, you could send people to the clerk of courts and give that individual some real responsibility and discretion to do things that make sense instead of to keep doing the same thing and getting the same result.
Right. Yeah, I don't know how our structure is comparable, so we'll have to look into that. And then I'm just assuming county executive is like a mayor?
Yeah, he's like, so we used to have a county commissioner structure. We had 3 executive and legislative body commissioners. And then we became home rule in 2000. And that's when we went from a 3 commissioner member model to an executive and then a 15-member legislative body.
Wow.
He is, yeah, he's a little difficult, but also he has very, very much authority and power and does not choose to use it for good. So we are often like, that's who we're battling with, because he oversees, aside from the row offices, which is, you know, district attorney, treasurer, controller, is that it? District attorney, sheriff. He is over every other department, you know, Department of Human Services, everything. The entire administration is everything else under him. And also I should point out, I'm pretty sure just from like reading that your sheriff does your jail stuff. Our sheriff is completely out of jail stuff. They don't do anything in the jail other than, you know, transport folks to and from there. So that's another unique thing that we have is, you know, our county executive is in charge of the jail too.
Got it. Wow, that's a crazy structure.
It
Ours
really
is
is. Tell
different.
me about it. If you have any ideas on how to change it, I've never been to New Mexico. Invite me down. We can work together. I am in.
We are so small that it's very different, and within our own structure we have problems. So
I'm sorry.
we could get
We
into
can
that
figure out
another
each
time.
other's. I'm down for that.
Thank you, Bethany and Brad. I really appreciate that. Just kind of the insider perspective of bureaucracy, and I think in the future there may be a way to kind of like integrate a perspective from a policymaker or someone on the financial side, because there's like, you know, I think having people say what is working elsewhere would help some of my colleagues maybe digest things easier when they hear that it works in other places. Obviously our structure is different, but I think that that's, you know, it's something that will help us in the future. So I'll stop there and see if anyone else has any questions.
I will just add on to that, Renee, is policy-wise, there are 2 things that we've been working on to implement. The first is eliminating profits made off of people in the jail. So we're not yet at free phone calls or, you know, free commissary, but they have to give it at cost. And then the other thing is that we're actually even closer towards is paying our incarcerated workers the federal minimum wage. So we are saying, okay, you're paying them nothing. Other places are paying them 30 cents. All workers are workers. We're a very, you know, blue collar union county here. And so how can you say you stand up for workers and you're letting folks basically do slave labor inside our jail? And 95% of our jail are not serving sentences. These are pre-adjudication folks. So they are in here either for like the detainers, violations of probation, not showing up for a hearing, something like that, or can't afford their bail. So 95% of the people in our jail have not been convicted of a crime for which they are serving right now and are working for free. And the county can't even tell us how many hours a week they're working. So,
wow.
Yeah.
Thank you for your work on that. So important.
And
Anyone else?
one thing that I will just say too is that our wonderful folks here, that they are still available for questions. I can bother them and beg them to come and speak to us again or have other discussions with the city. As Michelle and Bethany said about Michelle, I mean, the things that San Francisco are doing, they've done so much, right? So Michelle, I'm sure could spend an entire hour going into all of the different things that they've done and more in depth, or, you know, we can set up some smaller meetings also outside of the task force with other folks within the city. Any other questions for Michelle, Brad, or Bethany?
I just wanted to say, wow, Monica, what an incredible panel you put together for us. It's really inspiring. Hearing the variety of things being done and kind of the clarity of what they're seeing and why we need to change.
Well, thank you. I did not do it alone, and thank God that they all didn't mind me bothering them. And also, one of my colleagues was on here for a moment. Her name was Joni Hirsch. She had to jump off. I was hoping that she would stay till the end, but hopefully I'll invite her back. She was amazing in helping, assisting get all of these folks together, because she works on the Cities and Counties project, which I will talk about more in the future when I will get to actually provide more of an overview of fines and fees, even though we did it a little backwards. I'll hopefully be able to contextualize and reinforce some of the learning and some of the wonderful things that all of the panelists have talked about today.
And also I'm gonna, I don't know, Monica, if you can send our contact info out. I can't find the chat. I mean, I really have been on Zoom for 2 years now, but I have, did you
Have
just
one.
provide it? Okay.
We don't have one because it's like an official meeting and we can't have any little commentary that people cannot see or hear.
I'm dragging my screen out and in. I'm like, where is that? It's there somewhere. But yeah, if you could want to, send our contact info along, we would love to talk to anyone. I've made a lot of really good connections of other jurisdictions who are working on this stuff. And again, I will say, for the probably 10th time, most of the ideas that I introduce as a legislator are not my ideas. I mean, I never claim they are. It's from listening to folks in the community, and it's from talking to folks who are doing the work already. That is the best way, because you don't have to reinvent the wheel. I literally sometimes will take legislation from another jurisdiction, have my clerk change it to be applicable to Allegheny County, and just introduce it, because it's like, hey, they did all this work, they did all this research, it works. I changed some whereas clauses to be applicable to us, and we have this bill. So really, this kind of bank of knowledge has been so helpful of the work that we're doing, and I am just here to add to it for any of you. And if you want to spill some over to us, I'll be happy to take some ideas.
That's awesome. And one thing I want to lift up is that it's possible that Santa Fe could be part of the next cohort of cities and counties. I want to lift up some of the amazing work of our councilwoman that's here with us. She's sponsoring a bill it's still a bill, right? It's still a bill or an ordinance to end failure to pay, so debt-based driver's license suspensions, with 2 other city council members here in Santa Fe. So we're hoping to get that done, and then there's always the possibility we could apply and then be part of this broader cohort of folks.
If that's what you're doing, since we have 2 minutes left, can I just tell you what we found out that we can do here real quick about that? Because you're talking to somebody who just got her license back after a 10-year suspension, 6 years into my recovery. And I just got my license back, last year after 10 years. And I won't even get to how horrible that is, because you already know, because you're doing a bill. But one of the things that our county does is that, let's say the one thing that is holding you back from getting your license back is not an assessment, not a time suspension, but is instead you can't pay this undue balance, right? I'm dealing with it right now with my brother-in-law, but is if you pay consistently for 6 months and you motion the court for what you want that payment to be. My brother-in-law, he has 2 separate cases, so he has to pay $25 on each case every month. Once you do that for 6 months, they will lift the requirement that is prohibiting the state from giving you your license back. Again, your suspension, he was eligible in 2019 to get his license back, but he owes $8,000. And so he pays $50 a month, and you have to continue paying that. But as long as you continue paying that, after the first 6 months, you get your license back. And it's not a conditional license, it's just a license. And then if you do mess up and miss a payment, you go right back to losing it until you have the money again. But so many people just needed that opportunity because they were making payments that never happened. So I just want to say, think about something like that too, if, on your way. But that's amazing. That is so cool. I wish we had something like that here, but if you ever come to Pittsburgh, say hello.
Well, thank you. Thank you, everybody. And I don't know if we have other task force business. I'm assuming we might. So thank you. Yeah, thank you to the panelists. thank you so much for doing this for us. And I'm going to circulate your contact information as well as the publications. I wanted to do that after the panel for everybody so that there was some context.
Awesome.
So thank you.
Thank you.
All right, see you and have fun in your
Have a
meeting.
good night. Take care.
Good luck,
See you
Santa
soon.
Fe.
It's almost 10 o'clock here, so I'm going to see you later. Good
We
night.
couldn't tell by your energy.
I wake up like this, but for real, good luck, guys. I'll see you soon.
I love it. I wish I had that kind of energy right now. I'm like, ooh, fading, y'all, fading. That was awesome, Monica. Thank you so much for putting in the effort and time to get such a breath. I mean, that was kind of a little small snapshot that we actually got at the boot camp that we went to. Obviously, there was more discussion and panelists and actually people that had experienced incarceration and telling their story about how certain things prevented them from like living their lives because they were just kept in this like circle or cycle of like poverty, trying to pay off things that just it kept accumulating. So anyway, there was just so much depth and breadth. Thank you so much. I know it's right at time. I think there was something, Bruce, do you have a question?
Yes, real quick. I don't know if I've mentioned this before, but I don't know if Omi from Chicago, if that's still in effect, but in Chicago, they had a community service program where instead of jail or a fine, you were asked to go clean up the trash along the roads. And I don't know if that would work here. Is that something we should look at? Or maybe talk to her again about it? Because I don't know if they still do it, but I do remember when I was in court with some of the people that I came in contact with, they chose community service for minor misdemeanors and traffic.
And Bruce, community service, it's an option by state statute. So somebody can request it. The judge can deny that. What we found with community service is that oftentimes the people that choose community service, and this is in my experience, have severe mental health issues. So oftentimes they're the ones that are least likely to be able to actually complete it. And then it ends up that they end up getting a bench warrant for not completing and they get incarcerated, and then they're incarcerated, and that's how they pay off their fees. So for some people, it can be a wonderful alternative. For many, it just results in going to jail and being incarcerated for failure to pay.
But New Mexico has that.
Yes.
We can request. Okay, that's
Yes.
all. Thank you. Thank you for the time.
Thank you, thank you. We had communications from co-chairs. The only thing I wanted to say, well, there's two things, but one is that the contract for the community engagement with UNM, it went back to us, attorneys, and they made whatever changes, and now it's back at UNM. It's taking forever, like this back and forth. I don't even know what changes are being made or why it takes the way it does. But you know, Dr. Sanchez warned us that it takes long on his end, and then, well, we know it, the kind of bureaucracy on our end to be able to get that contract in place. So hopefully by the next time we meet, there's something that we'll have something in place so that we can start combining efforts to get that organized. And then the other thing I wanted to say is that we have a quarterly report due for our next presentation to the governing body. And Valeria, I just need to double check because they're already formulating the agenda for next week, and they may already have too many presentations. But I will find out tomorrow. And but the thing is, we still need to prepare for that presentation. So if it happens next week, which is not ideal, we've been all crunched for time, I feel like. But it would be helpful to give an update at the end of this month, since this is the end of the quarter. If it goes into July, it's okay, but I just need to double check with the city clerk who puts the agenda together and is informed by the mayor and other folks. And we've been having a lot of presentations lately, mostly because we have to we have our regular audit update because of our situation with the audit. That seems to take time. And then there's other presentations. So I will double check, and Valeria, I'll let you know. In the meantime, Valeria sent you an email about any ways that working groups could update that document. And I think, and here we are looking at it, I think there's just ways that we need to just populate it. I'm willing to like take a first stab at putting our working group info in there. But I don't know, Valeria, is there something that, have you seen any additions lately from other working groups?
Nothing. I mean, I'm going to be combing through our meeting notes because I highlight things that I think are going to be relevant to reporting. Like, for instance, like asking Emily for that slide deck of that great presentation you gave, Emily, because there was a lot of key points here that you've all highlighted as things that you want to make recommendations on. But I also don't want to just populate that and put words in your mouths, because it has to come from all of you. So I sent this link, I don't know if it was yesterday morning, and it would be helpful if you can all include the accomplishments for this quarter, key findings, and how these key findings are going to essentially inform a recommendation or an action item or a next step. So thank you.
Emily, do you have a question on that? There you go. Unmute. Do you want me to unmute you?
I can unmute people, sorry.
Ask to unmute. Make a, oh, that's.
Oh, there we
weird.
go. I don't
There
know
you go.
why. I kept clicking it, it wouldn't go off. Thanks, Valeria. I just wanted to know, I did put something in there.
Yes, I saw
earlier,
that. Yeah.
And that you should have all of those resources, because I sent them out with the slide deck and everything. What might be helpful, I was just thinking when I went in there, is that since we have the work plan that we developed, we had those priorities already laid out. So it might be helpful if you could just put those priorities in that document, and then we can go and populate for each one, because I think we already had those laid out for the year.
Yes, and that's great, absolutely. And actually for the report, I've already populated the priorities for the next quarter out of the work plan, but we're reporting on the second quarter. But yes, I can put that link to the work plan as well, so that you have a quick frame of reference.
Does everyone know how to access that work plan? Valeria sent us the Google Docs. I know for me, I have to actually copy the hyperlink and put it into another search engine because
that's weird.
It's for city stuff.
And it's also on your, check this out. I put it everywhere that I can. Look, if you also go into the meeting notes, it's right here. Here's the work plan as well. So I've put it in every possible place for a frame of reference.
To the shared document. If people have any trouble navigating that, to please let Valeria know.
Yes, please do. And I think just to triple check, because I know it's gonna take a second. Oh dear, now it disappeared. Yeah, everybody's has editing power here.
Nice. Okay.
Yeah, everybody's got editing power. So yeah, and I've already started, much like last time, putting together the slide deck. So it's more like getting the content from you and start formulating that so that Renee and Chris can review it before it goes out. Go ahead, Gino.
Val, I just happened to notice for Emily, you had both the work and the Gmail address. That would be a huge help if you could add my Gmail, because my work is not connected to my Gmail, to Google Docs, and it always, it's a pain to access.
Yeah, so send me an email from your personal email, and I'll include your personal email in the Google Docs so that we get rid of that barrier. And thank you, Gino. And Renee, I wanted to just double check with you and the team, because I think this is part of the alternative, the reimagining traffic that's scheduled for July.
Yeah, I'm going to pass it over to you for I'm done with my commentary, so I'll pass it over to you. So you had questions about the next presentation, right? That's scheduled for.
Exactly. And I think I emailed Monica and Emily today. because I think the reimagining traffic is coordinated by one of you, but I know that Sophie had either proposed, or Renee, you may have asked her to present on community violence. So trying to see if reimagining traffic is set to go for July, so that I can find some other time for Sophie. Thank you, Annie.
Thank you, Annie.
Thanks, Annie.
I think, and Emily, I don't know how you feel about it, but if you guys have something planned and if she can speak on that day, that seems good to keep her, since you have somebody committed. Because I think, yeah, I'm not sure if we have folks committed for that particular day. And I understand that's challenging, getting people to come in for a particular date to come and speak.
I'm totally good with that. If there are other dates, Valia, that you would recommend we move it to, then we can start connecting.
Yeah, so on your calendar, the other day.
Really? Wait, are you saying, Emily, it's not gonna happen on the 19th?
No, we're fine, like having Sophie, and then we can push it off to another date.
Well, I have another idea, but you can tell me if it's bad for you. July 5th is actually our next scheduled meeting. It's the day after a holiday, the day after my birthday, the day that brought another conflict that Chris and I have whenever we have a holiday on Monday, the committee meeting gets shifted to a Tuesday. So we have finance that night. And so I'm just curious if you all still wanted to have that presentation to Sophie for all of you. I've already heard it. Chris has already heard it. And so, but then I don't know if everyone's going to be in town either, or if there's some.
Is this Sophie Andar?
Yeah.
Oh, I saw that presentation. That was good.
You did. And I guess I was just trying to relate it back to our work, because remember when, you may not know this, but she was hired to do that contract work, and it was never like, say, hey, how does this combine efforts with the task force? And I think it was like she was asking us for data, and we're like, well, we don't really have data. I mean, it was kind of confusing. I think for her, I felt bad because she was like, you're a task force, can't you give us data? I'm like, we're still waiting for data. It was really odd, but there were some good things out of there that I was just wanting to see if there was kind of a potential to extract for recommendations for us. Again, it's up to you all. I don't know people's schedule, like what's July 5th looking like for you anyway, because I won't be here and Chris won't be here for that meeting.
I'm perfectly fine not meeting on the 5th and us having a meeting on the 19th, just because of that holiday.
Yeah, I figured that is how you would all feel. Valeria was like, we should probably just cancel that. So the 19th, we don't want to displace a person that is already scheduled though. Like Sophie's was kind of a.
Exactly, but because it said TBD, I figured let me just ask, and if it's not confirmed, then that's an opportunity, right? Unless it's confirmed.
I don't have anyone confirmed for the 19th, and we were probably going to just do an overview and maybe have 1 or 2 people join. So
was there something
move it up.
Was that something that, because Marcela, I don't know if you all know, but Marcela's been on vacation, and she's probably long overdue vacation for a month, and she's coming back at the end of this month. But I'm curious if that was a space that she wanted some other group. Remember, she was going to be putting together a panel too, but do you remember what that panel was? Is it on here?
Wasn't it on the restorative justice panel?
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Yeah, that was March 22nd.
No, but this was a panel, Valeria. This was a follow-up. It was
right. No, I do remember that. I just don't see it noted here as a TBD.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that might actually work. Emily, right? Is that okay?
It's okay with me. Monica, you're okay. I mean, we could look at a later date.
I mean, her presentation's shorter. And I didn't know if there was something specific for reimagining traffic that you were envisioning and a person that you wanted, or that you were gonna talk about it. What were you thinking? Emily?
Well, it was both Monica and I
Oh,
together.
right, okay.
So we were talking about, I mean, there are some local jurisdictions that have done some reforms. And so I think the idea was that we just present some case studies, and then if there were specific people in those jurisdictions who could join us, they could, but we hadn't gotten them, lined up yet. So I don't know, Monica, is there anything else?
Yeah, I had spoken to somebody out of Philadelphia but I mean, I spoke to her a while ago. I haven't confirmed a date. But I think Emily and I had talked, and actually Marcella too, we were talking about doing sort of an overview, providing context of other places that have done different reforms, and trying to see then who might be available from these places to come. It's just, yeah, I think it's perfectly fine for it not to be on the 19th. Honestly, on July 19th, if Sophie Andar is going to speak, I can also, yeah, I'm not sure if I need to do any more on sort of like fines and fees reform. I can do that to provide more context, or this potentially is enough. And then whatever we put in the final report can be actual, tangible recommendations that the city could accomplish. So I'm open to that also. It doesn't matter. I don't need to necessarily go into everything else, but I could do that on the 19th too, if we have time and we need to fill the slot.
I think based on like what they presented and how some of these reforms could actually apply to our structure for the city of Santa Fe or county, I think would be helpful, because then it frames it like specific to Santa Fe and what you're seeing, and then
Right.
what recommendations could come out of that.
Yeah.
So I'm up for that. I think, Sophie, that's a shorter conversation, don't you think, Monica? I've seen that. I feel like
Yeah, I think it is. I just don't, I'm just sort of saying this, like, we could also do this later. I don't, because even with a panel, right? Granted, there was a decent amount of people. We were going to have another person here today. I think that time just flies, right? So at the same time, it may be good to just have her, because then I may not be able to chat to discuss something anyways. So maybe talk to her or keep it open, and there could be other task force things, because look, right now it's 7:47, we're still talking.
Yeah,
so maybe
I know.
not a good idea to double up now that I think about it. So why don't, I'll take a later date. It's not, we have plenty of dates.
We don't really though. I feel like we're like running because of the community engagement piece. I feel like that's gonna also take up some initial time before they actually start implementing it. There is some probably feedback, and I'm curious how Dr. Sanchez will incorporate our feedback with that process. I don't know how it.
Right. So
You know what I mean?
Valeria, yeah. Valeria, why don't you take me off of the 19th? Because I'm sorry that I'm just talking. After thinking about it, it probably won't be enough time to do all of those things in one evening. And I can, whether it's with the report or at a later date, we can have a little bit more of a synthesis on what the experts presented on versus what's actually possible in the city of Santa Fe.
Yeah, I just didn't want to lose sight. That's why I had all three there. But so where would you like me to put the fines and fees recommendations with Monica?
I mean, I could do September 20th.
Okay. All righty. And then am I correct to think that on the 19th, there will be two presentations or just one? And if one, which one?
One.
Okay,
Sophie.
one.
The community, Sophie and our her presentation. And then the reimagining traffic, where do you want to move that?
Well, I'm wondering if we need to add a couple meetings because we've missed a few that, I don't
Right.
know if folks are up for like if that. Are we still gonna have the September 6th or there maybe one other we could add in August?
Yeah, we could do that. Let's figure it out via email. Valeria, I put it, maybe there's a, let's see, one. I don't know. We'll have to figure out another date. I want to let you all go because it has been a long night. Was there anything else, Valeria, that you wanted to?
No, just
Sure.
thank you, Renee. Yeah, just the well, not just, but the quarterly report and yeah, time is, I know it's only June, but pre-planning for the next 2 quarters, there's just a lot of activity. And it all leads up to that final deliverable, right, at the end of the year. So thank you all for all the effort and sending me all the information for the 2nd quarter. Thank you. Yeah, I'm good, Renee.
Any other matters from the task force members? No, tired, okay. All right, so the next meeting then is July 19th. We will try hard to figure this whole like in-person / hybrid. My gosh. Apparently there's legislation that's going to go through that the mayor is sponsoring to clarify this process about like requiring community groups to meet in person. And then we tried this hybrid and it didn't work. So I just want us to make sure that our time is used wisely and not wasted. So Valeria, did you have your hand up? Oh.
Yeah, just 2 last things. One, just I could do this here when everybody signs off, but just to confirm our working session tomorrow, if you still foresee us working, I'm still going to work on the task force priorities, of course, and can stay in touch with you via email. And then the second one is that this whole hybrid thing, I sit on another commission and they don't, it's like working effortlessly on that side. So I'm so confused as to why. No te escucho, querida.
Which group is that?
The Film and Digital Media Council.
Okay.
And it's, when I say flawless, it's flawless. Like, so
where does it meet? Well, it is a digital group, so
it's I think by Violet Crown that you all have an office up there. I think Julie Sanchez might work up there, but the person, the city staff person that works with them is Casey.
Yeah,
I think
Casey knows what's up.
Yeah, economic development.
Good to know. They have a staff person that helps, but the market station is set up to be able to do that in that way. So I will also remind them that's another commission.
And it's got a nice like gallery view. So for people who are joining via Zoom, you see everybody.
Yeah, it's cool. It has this little bird thing, but anyway, we'll make it work. Oof. All right, y'all, if there's anything that comes up, and send Valeria your phone number if you can, if she doesn't already have it.
Yes.
Just in case she needs to get a hold of you for logistical stuff for meetings.
Yeah. Thank you, team.
Thank you.
So good to see you all.
Thanks, everybody.
Have a good night.
Good night.
Bye.
Good night. Thanks, Gino.
Good night.
Oh, of course, Bruce. Best of luck.
You know who's this under the hand?
Who, what?
Ozzy, the guy that's giving me the peace sign.
Oh, yeah, who's that?
Ozzy Guillen.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he was the coach of the White Sox when they won the World Series.
Very